Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Tuesday morning at 10:30 Perth West Australian time, and you are with me on what's called a StreamYard. It's a piece of software where you can stream a little bit like Facebook Live. And today I'm talking about breakthroughs, your breakthroughs. How can you get to make your breakthroughs? And the distinction here is how can you make your own breakthroughs before the beginning of the next year. And one example that I always think of when I'm getting to this time of the year, and I always believe, I've come to believe and I've come to experience that if you're able to do and start a project or have influence on a project, do it from the outside. And so it's much better to begin to think about your breakthroughs long before you actually are wanting to make them. So today I'm talking about breakthroughs and how can you make them yourself before the beginning of the year. So two distinctions for a start is, where have you come from? And hello, whoever is here, tell me who you are. I'd love to see where you're from. But there's two distinctions that I work from when I'm getting to the end of a year, because I just think it's so important to be able to think about where we're going before the end of the year, and you have things in place before we start the following year. And those two areas is, one is where you have come from, as in your history, and what are your traditions. And the examples that I think of right now is Robert Kiyosaki wrote his first book, How to Be Rich and Don't Go to School. And that first book was written on a premise that he would be educating the education system. Well, of course, he was actually inside the system and trying to educate the system. And it was a major flop because he didn't realize that he had to be outside the system to make an influence. And it's the same as before we get to a new year. I don't believe that anything happens with goals. It's very superficial, very heady when we make goals. So think about, where have you come from? And one of the two articles that I have here is, we were probably one of the very first people in Western Australia, at least I know of, that ran a flower farm. And that's part of my history. What did I learn when we were growing flowers, exporting them to Japan and bringing in tourists to Western Australia in the 1990s? Also, what was happening in the 1990s for me was that I was one of the first life coaches. And people didn't even know what that was. So that article actually was written in our state newspaper. It was written in 1994, and it's hilarious. It's hilarious because it gives me distinctions on really what was a life coach about, and what was I doing, and how was I doing it, and who was I doing it with. And so when I read this article, I go, wow, I was using a fax then. Now we do use so many more tools. No wonder people are confused as to how to connect their dots. What are their dots? So I'm suggesting, look to where you have come from, and then start to look at, what are your traditions? And what are the traditions that you have either started with your family or are building with your family? For instance, I'm not in my 20s, 30s, 40s or 50s any longer. So I have some nice solid traditions in my family for Christmas, for Easter, for birthdays, for celebrations, and the way that we go about engaging and celebrating those occasions. So when you're thinking about planning for your next year and you want to make it very different from the previous year, is, what are your traditions and where have you come from? What is your history? What are the things that you can pull out of your history that have a meaningful point for you? And I call these your flex points. I'm actually writing a blog at the moment, which will go out tomorrow. And some of the points that I've made on there is, when you are looking to, maybe if you're in the mindset of that you want to set goals, even though I think that setting goals, as I just said, is very heady, it's very superficial, it's very analytical. What is it that you want, and what are you driven by? What are your values? What is really important to you? And that's why I always go, what are those meaningful experiences that you've had in your life? And did they, and how did they, and what were they and how did they take you to the next phase of your life? For instance, just simply, if you have been married and you had a huge wedding, or you had a tiny wedding, or you didn't have a wedding, or if you're not married but you made a commitment at the time, what was it in that experience that really you then took on and started to create another part of your life? And in my blog this week, I'm talking about how to create those traditions, and then how to carry them through and how to build them, and how to really flesh out your next year. Some of the points in my blog, which I wrote down here, is start to think about what are your routines and rituals, and double your self-care time. So this isn't specifically traditions, because traditions we tend to think of celebrating or things that we do on a yearly basis. If you were to chunk that down into a daily basis, what are the things that you do to take care of yourself? And this time of the year, I think it's so important to really double or triple our self-care. If you do meditation, then double it. If you walk on the beach, double that time. Spend more time out in nature. Spend more time with engaging with people, with meaningful conversations. And check on friends and family. And this was one thing that came out of our Global Women's Voice forum 2 times ago, which you can go to didowney.com, Global Women's Voice, and you can see the replays there. We made some very pertinent suggestions and ways that we all, the women that were on there, which I think at that point was Dr. Hilda Maldonado from Los Angeles and Regina Paula from New Zealand, we were talking about what works for us and what do we build on. And it was an interesting conversation, because Hilda and I are at our age where we have some traditions that we've been doing for many, many years. And someone like Regina, who's starting her family, has a young little girl, was able to pick the eyes out of some of our suggestions, and is picking the eyes out of some of her friends' suggestions as to what they do during the holiday time, during Easter, during Christmas. And for some people, they don't celebrate Christmas, but what are the things that you do for your holidays that double your self-care? And then I'm suggesting double your self-care. And then, especially in this era right now in 2020, check on families and friends. And the other thing that I would highly recommend is to give yourself the time, and this is where it butts up to how you're fleshing out your next year. Give yourself time so that you're actually able to do the very best work that you're able to do. And then that butts up to, what are your values? How are you able to extrapolate out your values so that you can actually see them working for you daily? You know, most people think, oh, family is the most important thing in my life. But if you were to take family and put it up into a nice safe bubble, what are the other values in your life that you really want to action in your life, and what direction do you want to take it? And then start to flesh out months, start to flesh out weeks, so that you can start to really see where your inner tension is, and the things that are tolerating, or that you are putting up with, that there are tolerations in your life, which means then you're starting to facilitate what is it that you really need rather than what you want. And that want often comes from social media, that we read on social media, things that we read in the newspaper or on TV. Lots of people still watch TV, and we are influenced by what movies we watch, what music we listen to. And so are you aware, and are you continually putting processes and activities in your life that you are consciously aware of that is affecting your long-term ability to be able to have those personal breakthroughs that you may not even know that that's what you want? And then I think that then butts up to, what are those skills? Some skills that you have, you may need to add to or embellish to get to where you want to go to. So in a nutshell, to make your own breakthroughs, it's so important to be able to accept where you have come from, which gives an ability to be able to accept where we are now and accept ourselves, which then starts to set ourselves up to be able to have meaningful conversations with people that are you can actually converse with, and there's no competition or there's no banter. There's a conversation that is able to move you forward. You leave uplifted, and you leave that your cogs are turning in your mind, that this is how I could do this now. Oh, this is how I could manifest what I would really love to do. So in a nutshell, as I say, how do you make your own breakthroughs? Where have you come from, and where are you now? And then where are you going to go? From the position of what were those history flex points? And then what are the traditions and routines and rituals that you create in your life? I was actually speaking to a lady, Shirley Campbell, yesterday, who's creating this amazing event, which will be held in January, and you'll hear more about that from me. And we talked about being able to, I lost my train of thought, but we spoke about how can we really set ourselves up with people that, and she and I are very similar, is that we really only have conversations with people that are going to uplift us and that we are equal with. And then there are people that we can learn together on things. And then we have our own mentors. So we're really clear on where we want to go and why we want to do that based on what's important to us, which then facilitates our ability to be able to ask for what we need from people that we know who can support us. So I know that this may be not new information, but if it's a reminder. It's a reminder for you to double your self-care at this time of the year. And if you do that in a meaningful way, those extra ideas, those little distinctions, those innate ability to know that this is coming from your intuition and not coming from your intellect. And once we know that we are being driven from our inner self, people come, purpose comes, the passions become clearer. So I hope that helps you in any way today to be able to start to flesh out where you want to go and why you want to go and why you want to make next year very different for yourself, because it all starts from the inside. But at the same time, it's about being able to hear from people from the outside of us and to observe really the truth about ourselves. And then that starts to reflect in our businesses and how we're putting those pieces together from what we know. So in hindsight, in reflection of what I've just said today, and hi, how are you? For some reason, I'm not seeing the comments. I think I don't have this set up correctly. So maybe I can click on comments right here and just see. Yeah, maybe can't post comments on Facebook. Anyway, so something's not going right there. The two main distinctions to help you to really make those inner breakthroughs, which is then reflected on the outside, which a lot of families and friends that you've known for many, many years will always observe us more often than not. I shouldn't say always, more often than not observe us from who they already know we were before. And yet we know that we have changed. And so be aware of where you've come from and what are those traditions and routines and rituals that you are setting up and have set up, so that you can start to be really clear as to what is it that you want. So then that you do start to make those inner breakthroughs, then you can move forward. Did I have anything else that I wanted to say to you today? I do have my holiday breakthrough workshop. It's actually starting in 20 minutes, and that goes for 6 weeks, goes from now until the middle of January, which is so exciting because those people that are enrolled in there, they'll be very clear, not only for 2021 in this short space of time, but they'll also be clear on how to do it next year, because there's tools and processes that I've used for years and years and years to give me the ability to not only be clear, but I think the ultimate aim is consistent clarity. And then the clarity of when we do go numb or something happens in our life for the following year, we actually have a very hardcore written objectives and theme for our following year. So I wish you well. I'll talk to you again on Thursday. Hope you have a great day wherever you live. And I'm off to go and start my holiday breakthrough workshop. If you still want to join us, you can. There's the link right there. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.